You know how often we all get lured into those cheap Al-Anon soundbars that promise a cinema experience but end up sounding like a tinny TV speaker after the first few movie nights? I've been there, sitting on a couch, cranking the volume, and still missing the subtle footsteps or the low rumble of an explosion. That regret is what makes any big purchase in the home audio world feel risky. If you've been hesitating because you're not sure whether to splurge on a full-blown system or settle for the cheapest option, you're not alone. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Nakamichi Dragon 1.1.6 channel system is positioned as a kind of AV-grade soundbar, but the company is clear, this is not a traditional soundbar. At 58 inches wide and built around a massive 12-inch aluminum driver paired with a 12-inch carbon passive radiator, it's more like a compact home theater speaker array that you can mount on a wall or place on a console. The first question many of us ask is whether that size and price tag actually translate into a noticeable upgrade over the typical two-speaker soundbar we see in most living rooms. Let's start with the listening experience. The ProCinema engine that Nakamichi touts is designed to drive the 6 discrete height channels and the front-wide array in a way that recreates the overhead effects you'd get in a dedicated Dolby Atmos theater. In practice, that means when you watch an action film with a lot of vertical movement, think of a helicopter flying overhead or a meteor shower. The sound truly feels like it's coming from above you, not just a phantom channel being faked by the subwoofer. For a sports fan, the difference shows up when you hear the crowd's roar rise and fall around the arena, adding a sense of space that cheap bar-style units just can't emulate. Bass is another area where the Dragon tries to set itself apart. The separate 12-inch reference subwoofer is described as Seismic and, after a quick test with a few movie trailers, the low end does feel more grounded than a typical soundbar's built-in sub. The sub's 12-inch carbon passive radiator adds a bit of air to the low frequencies, which you'll notice when a diesel engine idles or when a sci-fi blast hits the screen. The bass is tight enough that it doesn't bleed into dialogue, a common complaint with cheaper systems that overemphasize the low end and make speech muddy. Speaking of dialogue, the HiFi Air motion tweeters, AMTs, give the front channels a surprising level of clarity. In a recent binge of a dialogue-heavy drama, the actors' lines stayed crisp even when the background music swelled. That's the kind of detail that makes binge-watching a marathon less tiring on the ears. The system also supports both Dolby Atmos and DTS-X, so you're not locked into a single object-based format. Now, let's talk about the practical side of fitting this into a typical living space. The chassis is definitely larger than a conventional soundbar, and at about 80 pounds, the subwoofer isn't something you'll want to move around often. If you have a dedicated media room or a spacious living room where the speakers can sit on a console or be wall-mounted, the size works in your favor. There's enough surface area to let the drivers push a lot of air without sounding congested. On the other hand, if you're living in an apartment or a small bedroom, you'll likely find the unit a bit imposing, and the installation may require drilling and mounting brackets, which not everyone is comfortable with. Connectivity is fairly straightforward for a system of this caliber. There are HDMI EARC inputs, optical and coaxial digital inputs, and a few analog RCA ports, so you can hook it up to a modern TV, a gaming console, or even a legacy DVD player. I tested the EARC link with a 4K TV that supports Dolby Vision, and the audio passed through without any noticeable latency, which is a relief for gamers who need that instant response. Streaming isn't built into the unit itself, so you'll still rely on your TV or an external streaming device for services like Netflix or Disney+, but the audio quality remains consistent across those sources. One area where the Dragon feels a little dated is the remote. It's a fairly standard infrared controller with a few extra buttons for Dolby Atmos and DTS-X mode switching. In a darkroom, the backlit keys are helpful, but the remote doesn't have a Bluetooth or smartphone app option, which some newer competitors offer for quick volume tweaks from a couch. It's not a deal-breaker, but if you're used to controlling everything from your phone, you'll notice the difference. So, who should consider spending close to $3,000 on this setup? If you already own a decent 4K TV, have a room that can accommodate a 58-inch speaker array plus a separate sub, and you value a truly immersive audio environment, think home theater enthusiasts, serious gamers, or anyone who watches a lot of Atmos-encoded content, this system can be a solid